Okay, you got a notification?
Youri is recording the call. That's right.
All right, perfect. Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of One Plus One, your place for inconvenient truth telling and myth busting. Very happy with the guest I have today. We are joined by Boyan Stanislavski, who's he is a Bulgarian Polish journalist activist, and he is the he is the founding editor of the Barricade and co-host of the Barricade Live. And anyone who watches One Plus One regularly, past episodes and new episodes, we've had Boyan's co-host and colleague, Dr. Maria Cernat, when we were talking about Romania and talking about how the left can advance in Eastern Europe. And so we're going to be talking about Eastern European affairs. So first of all, Boyan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Glad to be with you.
It's an honor to have you, especially because I've been twice interviewed by you and Marie on your program. So it's nice to have you come on here for a change.
My pleasure.
Alrighty, so Boyan, so much. Oh yeah, and I do have to mention, yeah, the Barricade is a independent pan Eastern European left-leaning news outlet. I have to mention that, and they publish news and analysis in English, Polish, Bulgarian, Romanian, and other languages in the region of Eastern Europe. And all right, so the first question, so Boyan, the first question I wanted to ask you is, can you talk to us about your background and your upbringing, because you're from because you're from Bulgaria, but you're based in Poland. So can you talk to us? Can you talk to us about your childhood and your youth in Bulgaria during during the time of communism, when the Warsaw Pact, and so talk to us about that, but also talk to us about some of the positives of which I know sounds strange, but some of the positives of living of life under communism, but as well as talk about some of the trauma that people still have, because that trauma that people still have of that collective trauma that people still have of the autocratic communist system is still very much alive and well in Eastern Europe, and it's why unfortunately we have these market fundamentalists, these far right politics, as well as the anti-Russian derangement syndrome, right?
Right. Well, I was born in 1980 in Bulgaria, and I've spent my childhood there. I moved to Poland in 1994
Okay.
For family reasons, mostly. And my childhood was a fantastic one. I really don't have anything to complain about.
Oh wow. Okay.
My parents were part of the part of the bureaucracy that was in charge in all Eastern European countries. My father was a former army officer, and my mother was a diplomat. So, for us, things were fantastic. We lived in the center of Sofia, and I come from a family with left-wing socialist communist traditions. My grandmother, she was a high-ranking policeman in the People's Republic of Bulgaria. My granddad, he worked in the Ministry of Interior. So, we were definitely not the family of dissidents or anything like that. We were not repressed in the slightest manner.
Oh,
we
wow.
enjoyed all the how to say this, characteristics, features of the People's Republic, and we were able to access pretty much all the all the mechanisms that were really, really favorable for the people. And of course, you're right to point out that not all of the mechanisms were available to all people. That's true. This was not a perfectly equal society. No, if there could be a perfectly equal society, but that's another question.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely it was much more equal, and there was much more solidarity in the past than it is now. And I think it's much more correct to say that the collective trauma that people are carrying, okay, in their hearts, in their minds, is not the one from the Soviet-style socialist regimes that we had, but rather from the transition to capitalism. Because in Bulgaria, it's difficult to believe today, but that's true. I mean, there's literature about it, and you can go back and see it even on Wikipedia, okay, which I hate, but you can find the data there. 30 years ago, or 35 years ago, Bulgaria was an industrialized, very well organized country and economy. Okay, we've had one of the best agricultures in the world. We, for like, I don't know, 10 years, I think, from 75 to 85 or something like that. I don't remember all the dates exactly. We were the top world exporter of tomatoes and paprikas. We, in 1986, if I remember correctly, we even, was it 84? Well, anyway, in the mid 80s, we even became for 1 year the top exporter of tobacco. Okay, we were America, like we were before America. America was on the second place. I mean, the United States for 1 year, because
Wow.
right, we had a standing army of 300,000 people. We had more tanks than the Turkish and the Greek army together. We had high how do you say this, highly advanced computer technologies that were only available in 3 spots globally: in the Silicon Valley, in Japan, and in Bulgaria precisely. Okay, we were we had our astronauts, cosmonauts, we had people, Bulgarians in space. I don't even want to, start like telling you all the legend. I mean, legend, it's not a legend. It's like the true story, really. I mean, now it's presented as a legend, but it's a true story of this great civilizational upgrade, okay, that we experienced as a nation after the Second World War, okay? And unfortunately, what happened after 1989, and particularly after 1996 and 7, which was, the first, really, I mean, people don't realize that, but that was the first colorful revolution in Bulgaria in 1996, 1997, that eventually, because of this, as a result of that, we fell from, so to say, symbolically speaking, the second world into the third world. Because regardless of the fact that we're technically in the European Union today, we have all the features of a third world country. In 1994, when when my family departed from Bulgaria, as I said, for family reasons, we've got like connections with Poland and stuff like that. And my mother wanted, had a job opportunity here and stuff. So we moved to Poland. And by the time my father was a pensioner already, so it wasn't a problem for him to move out.
Yeah.
In Bulgaria, we had 9 million, I think 300 or 400,000 inhabitants. Okay. In 1994. Now, officially, we've got about 7, but unofficially, like the real figure is probably about 6. Okay, and what does it mean? That means that without firing a single shot, without a war, we had the results of a war. Okay, on there in Bulgaria, because to lose 1/3 of a population, then you need a front to stay there and be there, and you need this destruction that is normally associated with war. So that's one thing. Second is like the complete deindustrialization, the complete breakdown of the economy because of the introduction of the so-called free market. Okay, the complete devastation of the institutions that were that were organizing and facilitating, securing the welfare state in Bulgaria. The rampant privatization, mostly, the first thing that was dismantled and privatized was exactly the agriculture, which was the strongest foundation of the Bulgarian economy. And we had this collective state-run farms that were dismantled, and that gave the initial boost to the mass poverty that was recreated in Bulgaria, because it was non-existent for 50 years. Okay, everybody, like, regardless again of what you think about certain arrangements in terms of human rights and stuff like that, that's of course, there were mistakes made. Okay, but everybody had a job, everybody had a stable life. Things were predictable, rather secure, although not everybody had the chance, as I said in the beginning, to enjoy all the features that high-ranking bureaucrats were able to access. Nonetheless, we had a fairly well-growing economy. We had a society that's been lifted up from a peasant, backward, primitive society into an urban, modern, organized. We've made strides, historically speaking, that within 50 years, within framework of 50 years, that took Western countries 200 years or 300 years or something like that. So this cannot be underestimated, and this cannot be ignored, and this should be acknowledged, regardless again of what you think about a regime, or you're a socialist or something else. If you want to be intellectually honest, then you should just acknowledge it. Okay, and today in Bulgaria, most people that remember the times before 1989, pretty much everyone, okay, will tell you that it was better. Those who were born after 1985, okay, or particularly those that were who were born after 1989, for them, unfortunately, things are different, but not because they are necessarily different people, but it's because this devastation that started in 1989 in Bulgaria, for them, it's something natural. For them, it's something, they were born into that. They don't know any other world. And I do know the other world. Okay, I remember how my street, where the block of flats is, where I lived in Bulgaria, what it looked like 30 years ago, and what the way it looks like now. The infrastructure, everything. Okay, everything was different, and everything and everyone was different, I would say, because this trauma that you mentioned, it's a very destructive. It's a very destructive. I don't know how to call it, a feeling, maybe. All right, it's a very destructive emotion. It's a very destructive kind of phenomenon, okay, psychological.
Well, it's like it's like a derangement syndrome. It's because I remember when I was interviewing your colleague, Dr. Maria Cernat, and she was saying to me that in Romania, for example, you cannot have a proper rational discussion about communism, because people just get into they just get into this fit of rage, and for them it's just like communism is evil, and so you can't talk about some of the positives of it, even though the state of affairs now is I would argue it's even worse than than the communist period that everyone likes to shit on all the time. Right?
Look, there's an important thing that should be indicated here, because Maria Cernat is definitely she's much more knowledgeable about Romania than I am, and she experienced some of the things and stuff like that. But we also have to remember that the Romanian regime was much different than the other. Okay.
Exactly. They were.
Same goes for the Albanian regime, and I don't think they should be compared. Let's not forget that it wasn't only Tito, the Yugoslav leader who broke up with the Soviet Union, but it was also the Enver Hoxha in Albania and Nicolae Ceausescu in Romania, and all the three of them have done it for different reasons, for their own reasons, and you can discuss whether they were good or bad, but Ceausescu's regime was, in my opinion, definitely a hideous one. Okay, Maria could speak about that for hours. All the completely unnecessary repression that was there, the kind of prevailing retrograde conservatism and stuff like that, and the elements of bigotry, nationalism, and stuff like that. That was really something qualitatively else, okay, than the thing we had in Bulgaria or in Czech Republic or in East Germany and so on and so forth, which were much more progressive, okay, to their credit, to the credit of these regimes. Again, by that, I'm not trying to say that, there was no human right.
It's important because
it's very important for me not to stress on that too much, because if you want to hear about human rights abuses in socialist Bulgaria or socialist Poland or whatever, socialist or the Soviet Union, you can just open any news media, any history book or outlet or whatever, where you can just go and you will see an abundance of information about human rights abuse and stuff like that. So I don't want to be one of those who are going to start, apologizing, like, oh, I'm sorry, I have to say a few positive words about socialist Bulgaria, but oh, it was terrible otherwise because of the human rights abuse. Okay, we had some human rights abuse. We have some human rights abuses now. They were different in the past, different are now, and stuff like that. Everybody can make their own conclusion. What do they like better, morally speaking or politically? I'm here to give you, the information. All right.
Yeah.
So look, that's why I don't think I'm not very fond of comparing Romania and Bulgaria. These were two different worlds, all right? And Romania was one of the poorest countries, okay, like Albania, in the Eastern Bloc, and also Romania, Nicolae Ceausescu, that he as a leader, okay, was supported until the very end by the Americans and by the British. That's very important.
Not many people would know that, though.
So, today when you read some kind of when you read contemporary anti-communist literature, American literature, you will see people like, for example, Robert Kaplan, okay, saying, oh, and they will give you this example of Ceausescu, how terrible it was, and how, only he conveniently skips mentioning that it's actually Americans and the British who were supporting this guy, all right, until the very day he was shot. Okay, anyway, so this collective trauma is a very strong thing, because this is a civilizational downgrade. This is a disaster, okay, that has no precedent in the entire recorded history of the country. I mean, nothing ever in the 1300 years of history of Bulgaria that we know of has ever, had this destructive effect as the transition to capitalism after 1989. And this is also a fact that has to be acknowledged. I mean, the blow, okay, in terms of culture, in terms of economy, in terms of social fabric, in terms of, social relations, it's really very difficult to describe in a way for people to grasp the quality of this destruction and how it put us back, like, I don't know, 100 years maybe, or something like that. I mean, at the moment, we're not even a state. I mean, I would argue we're not. We're like, the statehood, the Bulgarian statehood is declining. I mean, we're a territory with some functions of a state, but we're a territory where not a single public institution does its job, not a single one. We are ruled by an oligarchic clique, okay? We barely, like, by gangsters, real gangsters, okay? I mean, even, you don't have to believe me, you can just Google out the Bulgarian Prime Minister Boyko Borisov, and there are so many stories about his gangstership, okay? And you can just, by looking at him, you will see that this is just a criminal of the lowest order, okay? I mean, you don't really have to be an expert just to, figure it out for yourself. So we're a country run by criminals in favor of these criminal oligarchic gangs that for the last 30 years, or at least 20 something, were basically are unremovable. They've been unremovable, and they continue to be unremovable because the political process is almost non-existent in Bulgaria. The only thing that is political is the artificial politicization of some kind of oligarchic corporate quarrels. Okay.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
look, and there is no real economy in the sense that you can see in Belgium or in Poland or something like. We only have some kind of well, the state collects taxes, okay, so there is some money flowing in to the national budget every month, but it's really crumbs, okay, because who pays taxes
because of the fact that so many people are in poverty, right? And because there's a huge brain drain of people moving out of Bulgaria in search of a better life somewhere in Western Europe or whatever country nearest to them can offer them a slightly better life, right?
Yeah. So absolutely. So I mean, the poor pay the taxes, so the taxes aren't very high, really. And we've got also remarkably pathological taxing system in Bulgaria. I could speak about that maybe later, but it's a kind of digressive system, like where the richer you are, the less tax you pay, really. Okay. Well, you're probably familiar with that from the United States in a way.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So we're in a situation of terrible decline, okay, and it's matter of maybe 2 decades, maybe, okay, until we pass the point of no return, where we cannot, rebuild the statehood, the nation, the society, the culture, because we're just going to lose it. I mean, we keep losing everything, okay. It's like a huge pipe, okay, with so many holes in it that you see the water leaking in, liters, gallons, whatever. And, sometimes there are certain measures in order to just plug one hole, okay? But then the water starts flowing with even more pressure, okay, from other holes. So, the pipe has to be changed. In other words, the system in place has to definitely be either strongly modified or has to be replaced. That's desirable from my political point of view, with something else. And I think that in terms of political emotions, there still is enough nostalgia in Bulgarians, among those Bulgarians that have stayed in Bulgaria, because most of those who have left are young people who had the courage and the perspective to actually start life somewhere else, somewhere abroad. But we definitely should demand socialism, only a better one, okay, the one that's not going to fall after 50 years. But I think that our most important problem as activists, journalists, okay, is that because of the trauma, okay, it's difficult to find people that are going to be actively interested in what we have to say and prepared to act. There's so much apathy and there's so much demoralization, okay? And make no mistake, this is due to the reforms, okay? Due to the reforms that were forced upon us after 1989. And this is because of the destruction and the blow up of the state that I was born in, which is the People's Republic of Bulgaria, a state that doesn't exist anymore. And no one can convince me, nobody can convince me that Bulgaria back in the 80s could not have been reformed. It definitely should have been reformed. Reforms were required. And it didn't have to be destroyed. It just could have been reformed, and everybody would have been much better off today had we taken, the Chinese road or the Vietnamese road or whatever, okay, but not the one that we've taken. The road that we've taken is the worst choice of all the choices that were in front of us back then. Unfortunately, it was not just our choice. Okay, let's remember, because people like to, use this cliche that, oh, we Bulgarians are so politically unorganized, we cannot just, make the right political choices. The choice about the dismantlement of the Soviet Union was not our choice. The choice about enforcing the market economy was not our choice. This was all choices that we were able to fight back against with the apparatus that we had at the time. Okay.
So you think it was more external factors that saw the that saw the end of of communism, of radical socialism in Bulgaria, not so much a genuine grassroots of people wanting another system. You think it was more external factors. In other words, the West, the US and its allies.
Absolutely. The West, plus also, make no mistake, don't buy into the lie that people that were protesting in 1989 on the central squares of Bulgaria or Warsaw or wherever, like in the Eastern Bloc, that they demanded capitalism. Some of them did, because they had no idea what it means. Okay, or maybe even if they had, maybe they had this intention to, like, I don't know, have capitalism in Bulgaria or Poland. I don't know. I don't want to discuss. Like, we're talking about a tiny minority here. Most of the people were there because there was growing, increasing inequality, and they hated that. And they were protesting the privileges of the red bourgeoisie. Okay, symbolically speaking, and that was a very justifiable protest and a very justifiable grief. Now, I just want to say that today Bulgaria is horribly unequal country. Okay, like the inequalities that we had in the 80s, despite it, I don't like them. Okay, I'm not trying to say that they were good, but they were nothing
compared to now.
What we're going on right now. So look, people were definitely tricked. They were duped. Okay, and that's the cutting edge of the colorful revolution, basically. All right, where you get people out in the streets. And they think they actually participate in something positive and good, but behind the curtains there are these evil actors operating, which are reorganizing the state, the economy, the society, the culture in their favor. And unfortunately, because you said about internal factor, I want to be completely honest here. There was an internal factor, okay, that allowed this to happen, that facilitated the process in all of the Eastern Bloc countries. So that was the demoralized bureaucracy, the demoralized wing of the bureaucracy of all the so-called communist parties in all those Eastern Bloc countries. So they saw somewhere in, say, 84, 85, they took a note of the fact that things are changing with the coming of Gorbachev in the Soviet Union, and they started securing positions for themselves should some kind of major reform happen. And that's when the big stealing began. The big stealing began in the late 80s when part of the bureaucracy and part of the secret services decided that should circumstances for treason that they could benefit from vastly occur, they're going to go for it. And that's exactly what happened. And up until today, we don't really have capitalists in Bulgaria. In a sense, like, people like to say, like, oh, capitalism in Bulgaria is tragic and terrible. That's true. But if we look at it more technically, we will see that there is no capitalism, classically speaking, in Bulgaria. What we have is a bunch of oligarchs that have been stealing pretty much everything that the Socialist Republic produced between 1945 and 1989. And it's amazing how much it had produced that they are able to keep stealing 30 years later, okay? Because if you actually throw these people into any kind of market conditions, they won't last even 5 minutes. They have no idea about business, competition, and stuff like that. They are just thieves, and that's it. Yeah.
Well, amazing. Well, amazing, because I think you already answered a lot, which my second question was talk to us about how sadly the end of communism and the Warsaw Pact gave us in Eastern Europe the rise of market fundamentalism, or what Naomi Klein would call disaster capitalism, and the period of shock doctrine. Because now what we see in Eastern Europe, people talk about austerity as if it just happened, after the banking crisis of 2008. But no, we've been having endless austerity and the horrors of it unleashed in Poland and Bulgaria since late 80s, early 90s. And actually that's a perfect segue then to my third question, which is, now you sort of answered this, but expand on this a bit. Yeah, talk about this a bit more. So do you think it was deliberate that the US, UK, Western Europe, and Eastern Europe made Bulgaria and Poland into this horrible, terrible laboratory of the shock doctrine, disaster capitalism, and so forth? Like, do you think that was something? Because do you think that it was something that was because you mentioned that it was actually forced upon by external factors, by the U.S., Britain, and Western Europe. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, well, there was no way for the countries. Some leftists will argue that there was, but I think it's a beggar's belief that the countries could have gone. I mean, the Eastern Bloc, they could have gone down the say the Scandinavian way, like they could have become, social democratic paradises and stuff like that. I don't think anyone would have allowed that, because that would require allowing the labor movement to play the same role as it played in the Nordic countries, which would have been impossible at the time. I mean, no one would have ever agreed to that. Plus, in countries like Poland, the labor movement was largely disintegrated because of the martial law and the 80s and stuff like that. So they just think. I mean, some people think that it was an option, and if we had only decided that we're going to go down that way, it could have happened. And well, I would say this: in some countries, like Bulgaria, for example, which was where we haven't had any kind of we haven't had the situation like they had in Poland, the martial law and stuff like this. Plus, we didn't really have any opposition. Okay, so everything was in the hands of the Communist Party. So yeah, they could have actually made a decision like this, and probably they would have well, maybe not maybe not entirely block kind of market reforms and stuff like that, but I think we could have landed in a much better place than we're now, had there only been some political will. Because the Bulgarian Communist Party, they enjoyed a lot of authority. They were largely supported. There was very little opposition. I can give you an example of that, okay? Because in Poland, we had this solidarity movement, which was, apart from the fact that it was a huge movement with a revolutionary potential, then there was a lot of CIA involvement there and other stuff.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I actually wanted to ask that. Do you think solidarity and anti-communist icons like Lech Walesa, was that all just actually basically CIA
No.
CIA puppets?
Okay, they were not CIA puppets, but they were puppets of the part of the secret services in Poland, which were already creating the conditions for the switch over from the regimes before 1989 to the kind of transition to capitalism and stuff. But that's a different conversation. What I want to say here is that there is this picture of solidarity as if this just is a genuine labor movement that rose up, and it's particularly cultivated by all the kind of radical Trotskyist movement and stuff like that, who have this crazy idea that everybody should be at war with the Soviet Union all the time, even 30 years after it's dead. It's really a beggar's belief to think that the workers of Poland, they organized a major uprising against the Communist Party, which was worse than anything in the past. Okay, that's a complete nonsense. There were many grievances, and there were many justifiable demands on the part of the independent labor movement in Poland, and there was some excellent organization going on, and they've achieved a lot. Okay, they've really achieved a lot in the 70s, because solidarity is not an invention of the 1980s. Okay, I mean, it existed before. in the 70s and stuff like that, they were, and they came to certain how to say this, agreements, okay, with the authorities, and there was a lot of cooperation. There were a lot of protests, but there was also a lot of cooperation, particularly in the 70s. So look, it could have continued, but then because the Western powers, they saw that this is an interesting, way to go, because the trade unions, okay, the labor movement is going to actually abolish or will act against the socialist state. That's a kind of confusion that they thought they could exploit, and they did. And you had, and that's no secret, okay, it's a matter of public record. I mean, you can just, there's tons of literature about how the CIA via the CIO-AFL unions in America, transferred tons of money here. Okay, how how other Western European unions transferred a lot.
So even the unions themselves, like Western unions themselves in the U.S., played a part in this horrible transition that Eastern Europe is still dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm telling you, I mean, we could discuss about that some other time, but there's tons of literature about it, and so it's not a conspiracy theory or anything like that. You can just read about it. But look, I want to switch back to Bulgaria, because the situation is a little different here. Now, the Bulgarians, they could have actually resisted, but they didn't want to, because they thought, as I told you, this demoralized part of the bureaucracy, okay, that acted in cahoots with the most demoralized part of the secret services, they thought we can actually take over, okay? And once they ousted the leader, then Todor Zhivkov, the dictator, the evil dictator, okay, they literally took over. They took over everything, like pretty much. A handful of people started, they kind of privatized the country to themselves, and then started cutting off the pieces of the cake and delivering it to people that then later on created these obedient circles, political, oligarchic, whatever, right? And this anti-communism that you said, it was never there. In Poland, yes, in Poland there was a lot of anti-communism, but in Bulgaria there was no anti-communism at all. And anti-communism is the dominant narrative, but it's only because there is tons of money invested into it, mostly via American NGOs. So the American NGOs distribute money to some people whose ideas and whose opinions about what's going on and what has been happening over the last 30 years are completely different to those of the majority of the public opinion, but still they are the opinion makers, because they have the money, because they have the platforms, and because they are heavily equipped by the Americans, mostly because by the Americans, also by the EU. But the Americans, they play, the biggest role here. So, when you turn on the Bulgarian TV, or when you read some Bulgarian press, then mainstream, then what you will see is you'll see all kinds of zoological anti-communism, okay, like animalic, savage anti-communism. But the thing is, no one thinks that. Like it's just a handful of journalists and a handful of influencers, as they call them now, opinion makers, TV hosts, and stuff like that. It's just them. Otherwise, the majority of the population, supports socialism, whatever they understand by socialism. Okay, they support some imaginatory system that is based on their memories from before 1989, or on the memories of their fathers, mothers, grandfathers, grandmothers, and so on and so forth. And they favor that over what they see now, except for the youngest generation, which, as I told you, they just grew in this in this pathological circumstances. So for them, it's normal. They don't see why would they have to push back against it. They just think that the entire world looks like that, and they are largely apolitical. So look, but I also want to mention, because I mentioned the question of the opposition. We had no opposition, so we didn't have to fight much. And actually, a couple of years ago, I think it was in 2013, I worked in a Polish daily paper here edited here in Warsaw, and my colleague, the colleague that I worked with, he used to be, all right, in the past, the foreign correspondent of the Polish press agency, which is like, it was the state-run agency before 1989. And in 1989, he was sent to Bulgaria. Okay, he was sent to Bulgaria to, make the kind of to report on the revolution that's happening there. And he was very excited because, from Poland, he was pretty anti-communist. He thought now things are going to get better, and let's see how, colleagues and friends in Bulgaria are doing. And he went there and he was completely shocked. And he told me that, right? I was shocked. I saw no protest. I mean, I saw some groups here, some groups there. And finally, in the center of Sofia, somewhere near the building of the National Assembly, I saw a group, like a small spot. I mean, not spot, but small area full of tents and some slogans, some banners. So I'm going to go there. And that was like a protest tent city. Okay, so he went there and there were 50 people and they were on a hunger strike. So he said, oh, on hunger strike. Do you know what kind of hunger strike they were on? They said they called it a cyclical hunger strike, which means a group of them didn't eat breakfast, then a second group didn't eat lunch, and another group didn't eat okay? Or dinner or something. That was the protest there. And then he asked, okay, now can I speak to someone important here, like I don't know, your opposition leader or something? And he got actually to speak to the guy that later became the first democratically elected president of the Republic of Bulgaria. His name was Zelev. And he actually was the top leader of the opposition. And he asked him the question. So, Mr. Zelev, can you tell me how big is the opposition movement? Okay, how many of you are out there? And just give me a rough estimation, rough figure. And he kind of, this Zelev, the guy, he scratched his head and said, like, well, including those, that are active abroad, I would say maybe 400 people.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. So that was.
But that's so interesting because it's like what you were saying at the beginning. That's what happened in Bulgaria and maybe certain other countries. You guys, let's just focus on Bulgaria. You guys were the first color revolution that we always see happening every now and then in Georgia or in Ukraine and later and then of course later in Serbia with the fall of Slobodan Milosevic.
Yeah. So look, 1989 was a farce. Okay, that was like a farce politically speaking. In this in this historical perspective. Okay, that's just obviously treason combined with some accidental moves on the part of the ruling class back then. Some combination of very bad decisions and a lot of pressure from the West, which turned us into what we are right now. And it's not only us, okay? I mean, if you look at the European Union, because people like to praise European Union is fantastic, human rights, and like my heart goes out, right? So it's if you look at it, how to say this assertively, okay? If you look at it just with cold mind, okay? Just sort of stop thinking about how great the West and the European Union is, and look at what the role of our countries, of our economies, and our societies in the general framework of the European Union is. Now, in Bulgaria, we've lost 1/3 of the population that started, work, that had to begin work in Western European countries. These are the smartest, the most flexible minds. These are the youngest people, those with that were sort of, that were expected to deliver the growth and the development of the society, all right? So they left and they became engineers in all kinds of corporations or scientific institutes in the West. Now, the second wave are those who have great education and great language skills, and they work, how do you say this in English? Low-skilled jobs, the kind of jobs that you don't require much of a qualification for. Okay, and they are, they have relatively stable positions on the market, on the labor markets in the West, in Western Europe. Now, the third wave of the emigration, I should actually call it an exodus, because like 3 million people is not an emigration.
Exodus,
it's like in the Bible, okay? So, the third wave is like entire families depart, okay? Entire families leave. And only one person normally finds a job. It's a very low-paid one by the standards of the country that they travel to, but it's still much more than what they would have gotten, 2 of them working in Bulgaria, okay? So they go there and they do all kinds of terrible jobs like normally students would do that, okay, in the past, in the 80s in Bulgaria, or I don't know, in the 70s and stuff. So they work, they clean hotels, they, I don't know, work in care homes and stuff like that. So look, this is why the West has done this, okay? This is the role they designed for us. Our role for the Western Europeans is to work in their hotels, change their sheets, collect their used out condoms from under the beds, take care of their elderly, change the diapers of their babies or of their grandfathers. That's the role they designed for us, okay? So don't tell me it's good, morally, politically, or in any other aspect. Now, by saying that, I don't think we should depart from the European Union tomorrow, because
actually, yeah, in fact, that exactly was the question I wanted to ask, which was, what role has the EU played in flaming this period of economic plight in Eastern Europe? Because I agree with you. Now, like, I do see some positive things about the EU, but but in Europe in general, especially in Western Europe, it is next to impossible to have an honest, objective conversation about the European Union without people automatically thinking that, oh, you must be like those ignorant Brexiteers of Britain that just want to leave the European Union, or oh, you must be like a far right person, yeah. So, but no, the EU is not an infallible institution. So, yeah. Well, you already started talking to us about how about the negative role the EU has played in countries like Bulgaria. So, talk a bit about that.
Not so much the negative role of the EU in this general framework. The EU is an organization of countries led by Germany, okay, and there is an economic interest behind that. Superficially speaking, of course, they're going to tell you about United Europe, about people's whatever, how do they call it, Union of Nations, Union of something like that. I mean, they've got all this weird talk, okay? The European, all right. So they've got these phrases, but what it all is just candy coating the goal of the entire initiative, which is economic expansion of Germany, okay, and some other countries that the Germany allows them to expand a little bit as well. So to me, it's nothing new in history. I mean, if you look back to 19th century or later, maybe Mitteleuropa was pretty much the same concept. Okay, that there's going to be this general big economic engine, Germany, and then the peripheral economies that are going to supply, that are going to have this supplemental role, the funding European most important central economic unit was going to be Germany. And this is pretty much the same thing now, all right? And with the euro, if you look at the euro, it was, the most important achievement of the euro was the actual devaluation of the Deutsche Mark. That's what happened. That's what the whole euro deal was about. And, and then of course, in the aftermath, later on, they were able to destroy, for example, the Greek economy, right? Because it was able to entitle to take huge loans because they were able to back it up with euro and stuff like that. But that's a different conversation. So look, in some countries, the European Union was very helpful. I mean, the participation in the European Union was very helpful. But that's not because the European Union is good or bad, all right? It's because certain coincidental elements were in place and allowed certain countries in certain periods to benefit heavily from the participation of the European Union. And that has to do not only with politics, but also with interpersonal connections. For example, Angela Merkel, which has been, the chancellor of Germany for, I don't know, 15 years now or something like that.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think she's been the chancellor of Germany since I was in what, the 5th grade or something. It's ridiculous. And yet Putin is considered, to be this dictator that needs to be ousted.
Yeah, that's a different conversation, but you're right. It's just hypocrisy and idiocy of the commentators. But look, Angela Merkel likes Donald Tusk, okay, a lot. I don't know what kind of what's the emotion between them, but she likes him. So once he was endangered here because of his policies, okay, and once Law and Justice, this terrible Catholic fundamentalist party, was elected in 2015, she immediately took him from there to make him the head of the European Council, where he has, the great competence of opening and closing the sessions of the European Council. Okay, this is like, and yet he's like the president of Europe and all. So, and he gets a lot of money for that, of course.
And I have, now, and actually, and sorry to interrupt, but I have to mention this because this is something that really pisses me off about EU, lovers, is that Donald Tusk. I mean, for all his talk about like, oh my gosh, Brexit was an accomplishment of far-right politics and fake news, Donald Tusk is everything he hates about people like Nigel Farage and Viktor Orban. He actually was a far-right leader in Poland. People don't understand this, but because the European Union has this fantastic propaganda machine, it makes people who actually were terrible, center-right to far-right leaders into these liberal icons and pseudo-left icons.
Yeah, well, look, on this I will tell you the following. There is this false concept of the Polish political life, which is widely spread in the international media of repute, so to say, all right? That, we've got this terrible hardline right-wing Catholic fundamentalist, far-right, proto-fascist, whatever, you name it, right? Government. And then there's this fantastic liberal democratic opposition and Donald Tusk, it's and no one can understand why actually, if everything was so fantastic, then why would people actually vote for this terrible Kaczynski, for this terrible Law and Justice Party, if everything had been fantastic before that? So, the situation is that there's very little difference between Donald Tusk and Jarosław Kaczynski. I wouldn't say that Donald Tusk is a classical far-right leader. He's not a far-right leader like Alexei Navalny, for example, in Moscow, okay, the one that is largely praised by the same media and the same establishments, although
and the EU itself, yeah.
Far-right, piece of scum, okay? He calls immigrants cockroaches, he refers to women as cows and stuff like that, all right? So but that's a different story. Now Donald Tusk is not like him, is not as bad, but he is, the Polish liberal opposition, the so-called liberal opposition, is rather nationalistic, okay? And the fact that Jarosław Kaczynski is more of a Catholic fundamentalist, although I'm not sure whether he actually is himself, but he pretends to be at least. So there's more radical posturing, okay, on the part of the Law and Justice, and there are some more radical moves in terms of the takeover of the public institutions, but it's only because there's so much hatred between the camp of Donald Tusk and the camp of Jarosław Kaczynski, that in order to be able for Law and Justice to secure their place in the Polish establishment, they really have to fight like tigers for it. And that's why we have this war. That's why we have these ugly scenes, okay? That's why we have, this artificial polarization of society. That's why we have all this posturing. That's why we have all this, I like to call it, emotional exploitation of society, because there's almost no political elements in it, because politically speaking, they have pretty much the same thing to offer. It's only in terms of,
as you mentioned, with the transition to not just capitalism, it's even beyond capitalism. It's just market fundamentalism. These oligarchs, they're like, there's nothing democratic about them. It's basically like when you're watching debates and so forth in parliament and so forth. It's just like watching two rival mobsters duke it out, more or less.
Or like watching sports. I liked it because Matt Taibbi wrote a book about it, Hate Inc. I think it's a fantastic book. I don't know if you read it, but it's exactly like watching sports. Watching politics today is like watching sports, and people get crazy and deranged over some people that they like because of whatever they can perform, right?
Even though they have way more in common over what they're fighting for than differences.
You're right. Yeah, but I think you're right to conclude that Donald Tusk is not very far away politically from Jarosław Kaczynski, and that they are both not far away from what is largely referred to as the far right. Now, but I want to go back to Merkel and her personal personal involvement or the weight of her persona in the leadership of the European Union and in designing of the European Union policies. So look, she likes Donald Tusk, okay? So she's working for him to come back to Poland on a white horse and liberate Poland from this yoke of Catholic fundamentalism, proto-fascism, and all the rest of it, right? Unfortunately, she also likes Boyko Borisov, who is the prime minister of Bulgaria, and he's been there for the last 10 or 12 years or something like that, who is a gangster, okay? I'm telling you that without any demagogy here or any exaggeration. It's a gangster, okay? The only thing that he knows is how to steal, how to extort, how to, torture people, and so on and so forth. And there's a fantastic article about him and his role in Bulgarian politics. You can find it on the Barricade. It's called The Decay of the Mafia State in Bulgaria or something like that. I'm sorry, I don't remember the title, although I wrote it myself. But anyway, you can find it there. And you can inform yourself, okay, about the real state of affairs and the quality of politics in Bulgaria. But unfortunately, Angela Merkel likes him. So, despite the fact that he's pretty much what Alexander Lukashenko is for the Belarusians, not a single, and despite the fact that people, in Bulgaria have been protesting for nearly half a year, every day on the streets, okay, last year, right, since May or June, every day. And it was, there was some note on the news here and there, people are protesting and stuff.
It's like the people who are protesting against the American, French, Canadian-backed thug in Haiti. Those are the unworthy protests, but like the rival oligarchic reverse racists of like Hong Kong and like Alexei Navalny in Russia. Those are like the worthy protests. So Belarus, because it's completely funded by like EU and like corrupt NGO groups, those are the worthy protests. But what's happening in like Bulgaria, which isn't genuine grassroots protests from the people, unworthy protests, right?
Yeah. Exactly. So look, at the same time, things that were happening in Belarus were very similar to the things that were happening in Bulgaria. It was only less violence. Okay, that's the only difference. Otherwise, we have the same situation. A gangster at the top, okay, who's been there for ages now, owning pretty much everything himself via his companies or via his, friends, okay, in other oligarchic circles. Or free press. We have almost no free press in Bulgaria. I mean, I don't know. I can't think of literally more than one mainstream media title that would be that is remotely oppositional. Okay, everything is in the hands of Boyko Borisov and his oligarchic friends, and there's not one single media except for maybe one, maybe two, maybe like if you think about it. Very flexibly, that is oppositional to the power. Okay, so it's the same thing, and I would argue it's even worse in a sense that we're poorer than the Belarusians. We've got less sovereignty than the Belarusians because people like to say that Lukashenko is with Russians. That's not true. That's absolutely not true. The Russians have been so angry with Lukashenko over the last 5 or 6, even more than that, before 2014 even, okay? So they were very angry with him, and he really thought he could play, he could play ball with the West and with Russia and everything. Well, not really,
exactly.
not for a long period of time. So, we're poor and we're less sovereign, okay? Because every major decision, politically speaking, in Bulgaria has to go through the American embassy. Nothing happens without the approval of the American embassy in Bulgaria. It's much worse from the point of view of the sovereignty of the state, of the authorities, than it used to be before 1989. It's worse. I'm telling you that. We're promised democracy, human rights. We're promised, all kinds of great things and liberties and so on and so forth. After 1989, the fact is that we got poorer, the country got destroyed, the society is in terrible decline, the culture became super primitive, and we're run by gangsters who are, politically speaking, absolutely dependent on the American embassy in Sofia.
And you guys have the euro?
No, we don't have the euro.
Oh. I hope you guys don't get it.
Yeah. Well, we don't have the euro technically, but our currency, we don't have our own monetary policy. Okay, since 1997, after the colorful revolution that happened in Bulgaria, our currency was basically tied up with the Deutschmark and then with the euro, and our Bulgarian National Bank is a useless institution basically, because the only thing it does, it translates directly the monetary policies of the European Central Bank to Bulgaria. So we don't have the euro, but it's pretty much like we had the euro. So we're totally messed. Okay, like we're totally effed from everywhere. And look, it could change. There still is some potential for things to change. All right. Now, I don't want to be over optimistic here, because I don't like this preaching of hope. I mean, people, tend to do that on the left, that, there's going to be, things are going to be eventually good. Eventually we're going to get socialism, eventually whatever. That's not necessarily the case. We might just, die out. Hopefully not, but we really might die out decaying in our own sauce. We don't want this to happen. But in order for us to be able to confront the system, we have to have some kind of idea, what do we want to replace it with, okay? And this is where the left keeps failing in the East and in the West, okay? I mean, in Europe. So, I think there's a lot of work ahead of us, but if within the framework of the next 10 years, we're able to come up with 10 years is the time before things pass the point of no return, in my opinion. Because we're really going to get to a point where we are not going to be able to physically reproduce, okay, the society, the nation. We're going to go to a point where there's going to be so much destruction. How are you going to feel, okay, how are you going to feel all these empty, abandoned villages and towns in the province? I mean, for that, you need, that could happen, but for that, you need planned economy. For that, you need, strong administration organization. For that, you need an inspiring political appeal, because you need to get people together, and you need to design to be able to offer an idea, an order that is going to suit everyone. Okay.
That leads, but then that leads to this question I have for you, which is because you mentioned that you're not entirely for abolishing the European Union. Now, I'm going to combine these two questions then, which is, are you an EU left reformist, or are you personally, a Lexiteer, somebody who would like to see the end of the European Union? And don't you think that one of the reasons why the left is so weak, particularly in Eastern Europe, is because so much of the left, or a pathetic excuse of the left, gets co-opted by the EU and NATO?
Right. Look, I don't care about the EU, okay? I mean, my political standpoint does not depend on the EU in any way. Like, it could be there, it could not be there. I don't care. I have my ideas, regardless of whether European Union does or does not exist. And that's why I'm not a Euro skeptic or Euro enthusiast or Euro reformist or whatever. I'm just
so kind of like me, sort of like an agnostic on the whole.
Yeah, I'm an atheist. Okay, I don't need a cult. So for me, strategically speaking, in 2007, when Bulgaria was able to join the European Union, I think that it was probably the best of all the bad choices that we had at the time. And I think it was the right decision to join the European Union. Now, the thing is, I was one of the naive, and I thought like the European Union would not allow this mess to continue here. But unfortunately, unlike Poland, for example, which benefited from the presence from its presence in the European Union structures, for Bulgaria, it was just another nail in the coffin. Okay, because what happens now is because Angela Merkel likes Boyko Borisov, is that the European Union delivers extra pocket money to the gangsters that have been raping and using and abusing Bulgaria and Bulgarians. Okay, they just get extra pocket money in the form of European funds. That's it. Okay, that's the only thing that we gained from the European Union. Plus, we got some flags for free that are now waving, wielding of the of the National Assembly or the President's office and stuff like that. That's it. Nothing more. Absolutely nothing. Or at least I can't think of anything. Because in Poland, for example, there were some spectacular investments on the part of the European Union. But why? Well, look, Poland is close to Germany. Germany needs Poland much more than it needs Bulgaria. Poland, in a relatively well-organized Polish state, is useful for the Germans. A relatively well-organized Polish economy is useful for the West, all right? And Bulgaria, for them, is just a peripheral territory somewhere. Some of them probably don't even know where it is, geographically speaking.
Yeah.
So look, for Bulgaria, things were only have been getting worse, regardless of whether Bulgaria was in the EU or outside the EU since 1996, but really since 1989. But then the colorful revolution of 1996, 1997, it kind of killed it. Okay, so the EU is not a factor that should play a role in design. That should be an important point of reference in terms of designing our program. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, look, we've got a universal solution here. We should be talking about a universal solution for all the oppressed groups, including, not only oppressed culturally, but also for those that are poor. Okay, for those that are unsatisfied, for those that are employed in shitty jobs, for those who are not able to have a dignified, normal life.
Yeah.
Okay, so we should offer a solution for them, and it cannot be a solution that is going to depend on the EU, because we have no influence over the EU as a party, organization, whatever. So the EU is there, and we definitely have some demands. We should have some demands, all right, and we should be able to define our role in the EU, and we should be able to defend certain economic interests, because everybody does that in the EU, regardless of the talk about how everybody acts in solidarity and it's only for the European community and stuff like bullshit.
Yeah.
Right? So we have to be able to do all these things, and I will tell you more. I think that on that, but on the solutions, not on the problems, on the solutions, we could work even with some right wingers, all right, who are also kind of at least those who are devoted to defend the sovereignty of the country.
Exactly.
I think it's a very important thing. And despite the fact that their incentives are different, the solutions could be similar. And we should bring together as many people as possible under the banner of defending the Bulgarian people and the Bulgarian state from further destruction. And then, we should definitely insist on our agenda, on our reforms and stuff like that. But before things are before this gangsterism, okay, in Bulgaria is put to a halt, I don't see how, we can have all kinds of ideological debates, and we can have all kinds of, fantastic manifestos and documents and stuff like this. But, we have to have a strategy to act now. And as I said, in the framework of 10 years, things have to change. If they don't, I think we've lost it. There's not going to be Bulgaria anymore. Not after 10 years later, but after 10 years, it's going to be decided. We're going to be past the point of no return.
But isn't the issue, before I get to these last two questions, but isn't the issue, though, is that too much of, the left, and this even includes, well-intentioned, what I call EU left reformists, people like Yanis Varoufakis, Benoit Hamon, who had his failed July something movement, or even an organization like Volt. Isn't the problem with those kind of EU left reformists, however well intentioned they are, is that too much energy gets sucked into trying to change a bureaucracy, as opposed to what you're trying to do with the Barricade and what you do in your activism, which is actually build up proper localized, the kind of think local and then act local and think global. Because what you're trying to do at the Barricade is trying to get all those Eastern European leftists who really want to radically, change the system to, mobilize, on the ground, as opposed to, thinking that, oh, if you just get a cushy job at the EU, you can change it like that, right?
Look, for me, it's a question of individual choices. I mean, some people just want to have a cozy job in the European Union, and that's fine, all right? Like, that's not my choice, okay? Because I would probably commit a suicide after 5 years having such a job or something. So, no, it's just not for me. But I don't want to, I don't want to get judgmental about people who just want to have a good and happy life regardless of the situation. It's a matter of individual choice. Now, I think that some leftists are very confused because they just put all their eggs in one place, like the European Union, or the West, for that matter, and that's a particularly annoying thing for me. Okay, the West, the obsession with the West is the complex that we've been. It's really about time that we drop it. Okay, and also this West is this prizing of the West is an extraordinarily right-wing thing to do. The Proud Boys in America, their main slogan, people don't know that here. Their main slogan is "West is the best." That's what they shout on their rally.
Well, I actually did not know that, but yeah, that's interesting. But yeah,
so they shout "West is the best." All right. So I don't think West is the best, and I don't think there's that we should really be obsessed, all right, with the kind of models and developments and ideas and whatever they have in the West, all right. We can have our own thing, and I myself, I'm there's a lot of talk about identities these days, right? So my identity is I'm a proud Eastern European leftist. That's my identity.
Yeah.
And we have our history, which we have to acknowledge, regardless of whether we like certain things or not. In this history, Soviet Union is part of our history. It's also part of the history of the global left wing. So I don't see a reason for us to design our strategy in relation to the EU. I think EU should be a part. Like, if people ask us what do we think about the EU, then we should be able to say that it's a bureaucratic capitalist neoliberal project that definitely requires reforms. I don't know, maybe it could be reformed, maybe it couldn't be reformed. I don't know. What does it really matter in terms of the agenda that we have? I mean, our agenda is not for the European Union. Our agenda is for the people that are the society where we work in, okay? So, or societies where we work in, which is like all across Eastern Europe, or at least that's our pretense. That's what we're trying to do. And NATO, European Union, these are all talking points which are, I'm prepared to debate this, no problem, but what I don't like is people obsessing, all right? So I've got critical attitude. My attitude towards the European Union is critical. My attitude towards NATO is critical. My attitude towards Western imperialism is critical. And I'm prepared to have a debate about that. I do not think that at the moment, the attitude towards, say, the LGBT community liberties is a decisive factor for the Eastern European economies, countries, cultures, politics, and stuff. I think it's important, and I definitely support, the LGBT movement and whatever transgender people movement and so on and so forth. But it's not something decisive. So I'm prepared, and I appeal to everyone who really is serious about political activity to be able to build an organization that can accommodate disagreements, okay, on certain things. So I think that the problem is not the European Union. The problem is not NATO. I mean, from the point of view of building the left, the problem is that the left itself is not prepared to demonstrate a mature political culture, and the left itself has a problem accommodating basic disagreements. And I think that it's because the left has detached itself from the labor movement to an extent that they don't even get any kind of feedback from there. And go to any trade union, go to any mass left-wing party. Okay, we don't have that in some Eastern European countries, but mass organizations of labor are very important because it's there where the left activists can actually exercise and train themselves in debating with people that they don't agree with, okay? Instead of cultivating their moral superiority, which happens on the anti-social media, as I like to call them.
Yeah. In fact, in fact, before I get to, before I get to this last question on, on how the left could, could advance. Yeah, I actually did want to talk to you about, this issue of identity politics. Now, is it possible that we can chew gum and walk at the same time? That you can that you can build a workers' movement, you can campaign for workers' right, but also challenge queerphobia, xenophobia, sexism, Islamophobia, and Romophobia, because I know because I sometimes don't like the idea that that you have to talk about workers' rights and completely not touch on queer liberation, anti-sexism, and so forth, but at the same time, well,
look, it's not
your response.
It's not a matter of choice whether you morally and politically orient yourself towards oppressed minorities or oppressed majorities, because like the oppressed majority is the working class, and then there are oppressed minorities like gay people or transgender people, Roma people, and stuff like that.
In the working class.
Or, as a leftist, like broadly simplifying it, okay, you support the underdog. Obviously, this is like the main moral aspect. So it's not a matter of choice. All right. Now, it's a matter of choice. What are you going to run on? That's the question that you have to ask yourself, in my opinion, as a left-wing political organizer, wherever you are. Like,
meaning.
Like.
Yeah.
So, like in Bulgaria, for example, if you make a choice that you're going to run and build on radical feminism and radical struggle with Romophobia, okay, you're not going to get very far. So, look, you can do that, but I don't think it's a very wise choice politically. Of course, you can feel morally superior, and then you can feel better than the majority of the Bulgarian society, which unfortunately, because of the circumstances and because of the culture and because of the certain primitive elements, okay, that have always been there, okay, is quite racist towards the Roma people. So we stand, as I said some time ago, all right, we stand for a universal solution that's going to include also the Roma people, because the Roma people also require and deserve a solution. And if you pose the question this way, I don't believe anyone except for a crazy ideological racist is going to have anything against it. So everybody deserves a solution. And we had a solution, okay?
So that would be so that would be chewing gum and walking at the same time. Like when you talk about workers' right, it's not that we're only talking about male workers' rights and who gives a shit about like the immigrants, the Muslims and the Romophobia. Like how you would approach it is like that is chewing gum and walking at the same time. Workers' rights. What's something that we're all having a struggle with is this unjust system of capitalism that's been force-fed on the country like Bulgaria.
No, my point would be, and that's the point that we're making very often in the Bulgarian edition of the Barricade. We say things that have been happening here over the last 30 years are a disaster, and it has to be rolled back. Okay. I mean, we cannot tolerate that any longer. Everybody is the victim of this. The white Bulgarians, the Roma people, the Bulgarian Turks, the Bulgarian Armenians, what have you, okay? Everybody is the victim of this. Now, the fact that there's the left discourse, so to say, today became very extravagant, okay, from the point of view of the societies like the one in Bulgaria or Hungary or Poland or, former Eastern Bloc, is a bit of a problem. But it's a problem not because of the discourse itself, but because too many Bulgarian and too many Polish and too many Hungarian and too many Russian leftists want to mimic the Western left because they just think it's the best model of all. It's not. It's not. Look at the West. They really haven't achieved anything in the last couple of decades at all. All right.
Yeah, exactly.
Look at the Corbyn project.
Even with Bernie Sanders and Jeremy Corbyn, they're not advancing. They're not advancing. That's just a fact. Yeah.
So don't tell me that they are a model to follow, because there is no argument, okay, for this substantial argument, except for the fact that you can be a part of the club that waves the rainbow flag, and there's no problem. I love waving the rainbow flag, but this is not something that that can be a proper political postulate in Bulgaria. In Bulgaria today, where people are super poor and they live in conditions that as I said, third world country, they will not care about queer liberation. It's just a fact. It's a simple thing. I'm not against queer liberation. Look, I'm all for the queer liberation, but I'm first and foremost of re-establishing a kind of economic and political and cultural order for the society to start developing, or at least stop being destructed.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is, and the theory of queer liberation is not going to help much here, not at the moment. So that's why I'm saying, if anyone asks us whether we stand for more rights for the LGBT community, we should openly and honestly say that yes, we stand for freedoms and rights for them and civic liberties and stuff like that. Yeah, that's true. But at the same time, we should be able to accommodate disagreements, because we're going to get workers and I don't know, people in our party, okay,
who are from socially conservative backgrounds.
We're going to have people that are against gay marriage, and we should be able to discuss this, okay, and debate it, and not like just morally cancel people because they don't have, their views aren't progressive enough. Look, our societies, the societies east of the Elbe River in Europe, our history is very difficult, and we were, for a long period of time, we were very primitive, okay? We're primitive societies. And the Soviet Union and the Marxist ideology and the socialist states, they gave us an enormous civilizational boost. And today, because of that experience, we can proudly confront the Westerners, because we are now no worse than them in terms of social and cultural development, no worse than them in terms of civilizational level, and so on and so forth. It's just that for us, the liberal democratic values that are so cherished, okay, sometimes even I think artificially to an extent in the West, are just not as important as they are for the West. That means that politically speaking, the left should support the underdog, but should make wise choices on what are they going to run in terms of political, substantial political battle.
Yeah. And I just have to say, the Barricade has talked about the persecution of queer people and rampant institutional sexism. I mean, you guys don't. You guys do talk about those issues in the Eastern European context. So I hope people don't get the idea that you guys just want to throw the issue under the bus. No, because that's not all what you guys are about.
Throw everyone under the bus. We want everybody to come together and start thinking about how to rebuild our society and our states. That's what we want. We don't want to exclude anyone. We want, black people, transgender people, Roma people, white people, everybody that wants to change the situation. They're very welcome, regardless of whether they call themselves patriotic or progressive. It doesn't mean anything in Bulgaria today. You can call yourself a leftist, right? It really doesn't mean anything. Even in Poland, Donald Tusk is considered a left-wing person by some. And
pseudo-left, though.
Yeah. Well, some are going to tell you how Yaroslav Kaczynski is a socialist leader because he gave people some welfare benefits.
But it's interesting, and that leads to this question, which is now in Eastern Europe. So say hopefully this pandemic, buggers off at the end of this year, and we can all go, travel normally. Because I would really like to, travel with you, with you and the good doctor across Eastern Europe and have, public events where we talk about, building an Eastern European left. And I am of the opinion that, yeah, it is about knowing your audience, sometimes. So that said, I'm curious, given all you just said. So in Eastern Europe, when, which left, icon would resonate with a new, with a new Eastern European left audience, because of the extreme anti-communist left fundamentalism. In general, by default, if you say that you're of the left, you're rejected. But so who would be welcomed with open arms in Eastern Europe now, and who would be rejected? Because I imagine now, like, like George Orwell, would he be considered an icon of the Eastern European left?
I don't think so. I don't think we need icons. I mean, I would. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not trying.
Okay, but then how would somebody like Jean-Paul Sartre be received in the Eastern European context, or somebody like Albert Camus?
They would say, but and how they would approach, but like what their platform would be and stuff. Because look, in terms of receiving, in terms of advice, or in terms of political leadership from the West, I don't think it's really required here. I mean, we don't want any more Western kind of meddling and Western-led political process. Okay.
Like having like a Yanis Varoufakis, or even somebody like Richard Wolff or Michael Hudson.
Not talking about other people. Look, I mean, people that are. Yanis Varoufakis and Richard Wolff are people that are much better known in the West than in the East. Okay, like some people know them in Russia, some people know them in Bulgaria, some people know them in Poland, but it's a handful of people. Okay, now we're going to have an event with Richard Wolff on the 17th on the Barricades, on the Barricade. That's the name of our show. Okay, so we're trying to popularize his thought. So in this respect, definitely, yeah, sure, their analysis is absolutely welcome. Totally. What I reject is like the idea of the notion that we can have an iconic person from the West that we're going to get tons of unsolicited advice from, and we're going to be following that. No, that's our responsibility. We don't need anyone from the West. We don't need anyone from the EU. We don't need anyone from America. We need us to get together and work out a platform that is going to be appealing enough. And you really don't have to be, it's not rocket science. It's enough not to be a moron. And you just have to come together and start creating credible journalism, credible political messages, and credible political talking points. And of course, it's not going to happen within a week. It's not going to happen within a year. We've been working on that already since 2016. Okay, and we still haven't gotten very far, but it's not because we're stupid, but because we're building the base, and it just requires a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of money. And here's another message for my left-wing friends all across Eastern Europe, guys. There are no shortcuts. Okay, it's not going to happen. I mean, we got to build the base if we really want to do the left wing, what the left wing is supposed to do historically, build mass populist socialist left-wing movements. That's what we have to do, in my opinion.
Because as you mentioned, because it reminds me of what you were saying when you were explaining the situation. It's Eastern European issues which require Eastern European solutions. Not we need to have the Nordic model coming here, or we need to have a socialism like how it's done in France, or we need to have a socialism like what we don't have in in Britain, Canada, Australia, and the US, right?
We don't have to make it up. I mean, we've had socialism, and this is a good reference point. It was not a fantastic system, obviously, There were many mistakes were made in the Soviet Union, in the socialist Bulgaria. Our question is how to build socialism without these mistakes. I don't think it's really rocket science. Again, it's a question only of not so much of what kind, and definitely we need a program of transition and a program for a socialist society. That's true. We need that, and we have to be working on that. And I'm aware of at least 5 initiatives, okay, that I can speak from the top of my head, that are working on these kind of things, okay, on designing a platform and stuff like that. Some of them I like better, some of them I like less, but that doesn't matter. People are working on that, and we should be working on that. We should, it's not so much whether we can borrow from France, we can borrow from Britain, we can borrow from Sweden if we like, but this, Bulgaria is not Sweden and has never been Sweden and will never be. Okay, if Bulgaria has similarities, then it's got similarities with Belarus and Russia and Poland, maybe. Okay, yeah. Or Greece, but not with France. So
because even the idea of a liberal democracy, because I remember watching your debate on Alexei Navalny, with the Bulgarian Russian guests that you had on, and the problem is, yes, it would be nice if if Putin, this autocratic friendly oligarch gets out, but what are you going to replace him with? If you replace him with a person who calls themselves a liberal, don't expect the situation to improve in Russia, because they're still going to have that unjust capitalist system, which is also the same thing in Eastern Europe when you have all of these, all these thousands of people protesting against corruption, and most of the time they're funded by, George Soros or some other rival oligarch who has no interest in actually changing, why things are messed up the way they are, right?
Mentioned it. I want to say that as a proud Eastern European leftist, I totally reject the West lecturing me or us on corruption. Okay, no way. I just don't accept anything here, and I want all your NGOs that are combating corruption allegedly and stuff like that out. All right. The only thing that you're doing is you're just adding gasoline to the fire. That's what you're doing. With the corruption that they are exercising on site, wherever they are, be it Russia or Bulgaria or something like that. All the anti-corruption programs, okay, are just more corruption. So please go ahead. And then, what they achieved is that they achieved this, achieved designing, okay, crafting a mantra about the Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe equals corruption. That's what they say. As if there is no corruption in France or the United States. I mean, please. Do we have problems with corruption? Of course. Do you have problems with corruption? Of course. But how about you go home and deal with your corruption?
And on top of that, as he mentioned, the EU and its NGOs, America and Britain and its NGOs and its rival oligarchs, they're the reasons why Eastern Europe and Russia's in the situation it is. They gave us the corruption, which the Guardian, the BBC, every now and then talk about, there's corruption in Eastern Europe and people are protesting, and what we need is an oligarch that we back to fix it.
Yeah, of course. And the idea, for example, that Alexei Navalny could remove corruption from Russia is probably the most ludicrous concept that I've ever heard in my life regarding Russian politics. I mean, I've never heard. He was a product
of Yeltsin. He was a product of Yeltsin, just like Putin's a product of Yeltsin. But exactly.
So corruption is a very good talking point here, because that's exactly what the West would like us to be associated with. We are these handicapped, societies, handicapped regimes, handicapped political arrangements, in the East, that have to be taken care of. We have to be taken care of by the West, because we cannot do things on our own. And now, for example, when Russia, with Putin as a legitimate leader of the Russian nation, by the way, is not playing the game, when they don't play ball with the West, saying that, oh yes, please come enlighten us and give us your ideas about how to combat corruption. Now when they're just showing their middle finger, saying, go away, we're going to do things our the way we think is the best for us, and when pretty much everybody supports this idea in Russia, then you can see this anti-Russian, okay, deeply Russophobic, xenophobic, and racist to an extent, right? Campaign against Russia in the international media. So, of course, when we start doing something independently, we're going to have the same problem. That's why we have to make friends internationally. And sometimes we're going to have to make friends with, people and regimes that we don't necessarily like. But we're going to have to do that if we want to have some kind of political independence in order to be able to enact our agenda. Because if you feel that the European Union or the so-called West, whatever one understands by West, okay, but the America or the European Union or the IMF, for that matter, okay, if you think they're going to actually allow genuine socialistic policies in Bulgaria or Poland, you're badly mistaken. All right.
Yeah.
And we're going to be already now we're confronted with a huge propaganda machine. We're going to be confronted even worse. But that's why we have to work on strategies, not only in terms of the internal political process, but also in terms of the international political process. And we have to be able to put ourselves in a situation where they cannot, take us away, just like they took away Syriza, for example, okay, because he was very weak, particularly particularly internationally. Like Tsipras knew very well that he's going to become the prime minister of Greece, and that he will have to confront the EU. And I never once saw him traveling to Moscow, to Tehran, to Caracas, to Havana, to all these places where he could get help, regardless of whether he would be on the good or bad terms with the EU. So what happened is he went to Brussels. They put him on this conveyor, and he gave up. Right? That was it. So we can't be weak. All right, we have to be strong, we have to be appealing, and we really have to be very mature when it comes to politics. And there is this segment of the left, particularly in Eastern Europe, that don't even think they've given up long ago on taking power institutionally. Okay, they just want to run their own little show somewhere on the fringes of the political process. So they don't have to think about anything like that. They can do whatever comes their way. Could be rainbow flags we're waving today. It could be the free press that we're defending, like it happened in Poland. 48 hours ago, we had a major media strike. I don't know whether you heard about it. It's ludicrous. So, it could be anything, and they're going to go for it because there's a lot of hype to create, but there's no political substance in it. And they can just keep, getting grants, keep getting some money from here, from this foundation, from that foundation, from the EU, whatever. But it's not fun. I mean, I used to be. I'm active on the Polish left since 1998.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
I've been in these organizations, okay, that take money and chew on them, and then they throw up something, okay. And this is no fun. I mean, if you're serious about it, if you're not serious, then yeah. But if you're serious about politics, then it's not a place for you to go. The places for you to go is where people are and where people feel that it's a place for them to be when they want to change something, or some mass parties. And I'm telling you, it differs from country to country. So there is no. And my idea fix, okay, is to bring as many organizations as many people throughout Eastern Europe together, regardless of whether their country is in the EU or not. I want to see Bulgarian socialists or leftists or social democrats or whatever. Russian communists, Belarusian leftists, Polish leftists, Hungarians, getting together and having a platform for cooperation. Of course, they're going to go to their country and they're going to do what they feel is best. But we need some exchange of methodology, work, experience, and ideas and discussions. Because look, in Russia, for example, they've got this massive communist party. The Communist Party of the Russian Federation is a mass party, okay? And they are the biggest opposition platform. Not Navalny. He's, I'm sorry, he is what? A
joke.
opposition leader, right? Like it's it's like the Communist Party of the Russian Federation is the real oppositional platform in Russia. And I would like, I'd like to discuss with those guys. All right, at least every once in a while, we should have some kind of organizational political framework that helps us facilitate this collaboration. And I very much want to get to a point where the most serious people on the left, regardless of whether they are parliamentarians or whether they are activists or whether they are journalists or academics, are able to come together and create an organization that is going to facilitate the collaboration of all the left progressive forces in Eastern Europe. I think it's super important. And I don't want to rebuild the Warsaw Pact. I don't know rebuild this kind of, but we've been taken away something that was in place institutionally and that has helped a lot our communist parties over the years, okay, after the Second World War, over decades. So I don't see why we should not use this mechanism.
Then very two quick questions. Just to follow up then, this is the second to last question, and I have one more for you, which is, could a party like the Socialist Equality Party, I don't know if you read the World Socialist website, if you're familiar with the International Committee for however that goes, but could a party like the SCP be able to advance in Bulgaria or somewhere in Eastern Europe, or because of because of the anti-communist fundamentalism, they won't be able to advance, because the moment you wave a banner of Leon Trotsky and you talk about like the positives of Lenin and so forth, they'll just be rejected, even if their policies might be the best policies for Eastern Europe.
I will tell you why they're going to be rejected. I mean, they're going to be rejected because they're going to act according to the model, to the Western model of establishing left-wing sects. That's why they're going to fail everywhere. They failed in the West. They're going to fail in the East even worse. Now, no one's going to accept, no one's going to accept cults anymore. And Trotskyism, unfortunately, because of the political culture that developed over the years after the death of Trotsky and stuff like that, became to a large extent a cult. Okay, and that's my estimation, at least. I mean, people might not agree with me, but this kind of reference.
And I've had people from the World Socialist website on the show, and if any of them want to make a comment of disagreements, they're more than welcome to. But yeah, continue with what you were saying.
Sure. Look, I'm not talking about individuals. I'm talking about a general pattern here, which is my observation. It might not be. Maybe it's a false observation. I don't know. My observation is that there were many attempts in Eastern Europe to create left-wing sects by, according that would model themselves on their Western organizations. Like if you come to think of a classical Trotskyist, okay, in Poland or Bulgaria or wherever else, you see an elderly man who does not speak well the language of the country where they were exported to build, this professional revolutionary whatever organization, and sells papers which are weird. Okay, even by our Eastern European standards, they are just weird. And also their criticism of the Soviet Union, which is just the kind of inheritance of the private war that Leon Trotsky had with the Soviet Union, is just something that's never going to get. I don't think there's a chance for it to become an important, a serious element in the political discourse in the Eastern European countries. But this is just my estimation. I'm all for debating. So if there is someone who thinks that we can build a socialist left in Poland or Bulgaria, basing ourselves on Trotskyist model, we could debate that. I don't think this stance is really anything that could be adapted, okay, to our situation here. And also, as I said some minutes ago, I don't really think we need personalities and leaders and names and stuff like that. We need a program and we need an appeal, okay, that is going to be really inspiring to the people. And so far, the left has failed to deliver something like that, with some exceptions, okay, over the last 30 years. I could speak about that. But in general, I would say that if we're going to build anything meaningful as a political center, left-wing, leftist, socialist, communist, whatever you want to call it, center in Bulgaria or Poland or Hungary or Czech Republic and stuff like that, it has to be based on something that people there in these respective countries know. And that's not whatever committee for whatever Marxist international that is just something that belongs to the Western political culture. And I'm sorry, I'm really, like, I don't want to downplay the efforts of the people that have been building those organizations in the West. Probably some of them have had some tremendous successes, but this sort of thing, an import from the West, just doesn't work here. Okay, and again, I don't want to sound like a crazy Duginist or something, but the West and the East are just not the same cultural, historical, and sociological, societal entities. Okay, so I think that, you know, the general Marxist, left-wing, socialist, communist ideology is global, but we're not going to have the same kind of socialism in Sweden and in Bulgaria and in the United States and in China. All right, things are going to be a little different, and we gotta have to find our own way there. I think we're too weak to find our own way there at the moment in Bulgaria, Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic, Lithuania, and so, okay, separately. That's why I think we should come together as we had once. We had come together under the banner of under the red banner of the Soviet Union, all right, and it was pretty forceful and not good, but it worked. Like, it worked in terms of the mechanism that it established. Okay, the mechanism was good. The enforcement and the violence behind it wasn't good, but we don't want to bring people violently together now. We want to bring them voluntarily. Let's just repeat certain mechanisms that were in place 30, 40 years ago that were very positive, okay? Collaboration, mutual exchange of experience, discussions, including, in-depth political and philosophical, if you like, discussions. We've had that. It was published in many languages. There was a lot of internationalism in practice. We have to go back to these traditions, minus the kind of authoritarian element that was there. And it's really not something that is very difficult, in my opinion. It just requires a lot of goodwill, a lot of work, and unfortunately, it requires also a lot of, how to say that, the kind of, a lot of patience. All right, in a way. Look, we've.
Yeah, and that goes back to what you were saying, that if you finally discover somebody who's open to leftism, but they happen to be, a sexist, queerphobic, Islamophobic, or xenophobic, the response should not be to just, okay, you're banned from the party. No, it should be, okay, we disagree on that, and I'm going to engage with you and explain to you why you need to.
Yeah, but let me just make one point here, okay? And before I make the point, I just want to finish my thought it requires a lot of patience, and we work in conditions of a civilizational disaster in some countries, and a lot of pressure from the West and from the mainstream and from the EU and America, like in Poland, all right? So it's difficult conditions, but we still have to work, all right? And at least that's my point. That's my position here. And now on the question of people joining your party who are queerphobic or sexist or something like, look, people that come to your party or whatever party you establish, Socialist Party, Communist Party, whatever, socialist organizations, they're not going to come and tell you, I'm joining this organization because I want to discriminate against the Roma people. That's not the initial position that people come with. It's only that you discover, okay, within a framework of collaboration with certain people that are your rank and file members or local leaders, that they might have this mistaken ideas about be it Roma people or gay people or something like that. And of course, you have to engage in a discussion with them. Plus, you also have to have political trainings. People have kind of forgotten about that because it's like, it's from something from the past. But yeah, we have to organize political trainings for our members. We should organize political trainings, and we should offer that also to the labor movement, to the trade unions that exist, to some other parties that, we could train their members. We've got some fantastic educational speakers, which is true. Okay. And I think it also speaks to your idea, which I am very much fond of, that we should have all these public events, all right, in all these countries in Eastern Europe, and speak about how to come together and build the movement, because everything else really today, from the point of view of left-wing politics in Eastern Europe, is suicide. Come together and organize the labor movement. That's it. Like, if you go, if you give this up for, I don't know, doing whatever, like these petty things, all right, that the kind of social cultural identity obsessed nonsense, I think it makes no sense politically.
Then final question that I have is, any hope that a sensible anti-war, anti-imperialist movement that advocates détente with Russia in the wings in Eastern Europe, or like so many of the issues we discussed, it's something that just has to be built at the moment?
Pretty much everything has to be built in institutionally, okay? Because otherwise, in terms of emotions and in terms of sentiment, it's there. For example, the question of détente with Russia. Look, that's very easy to argue, really, because in fact,
sorry to interrupt, because I remember asking Dr. Cernat, about how difficult it is to be a leftist that wants détente with Russia while criticizing Putin, blah blah blah. And she was saying, at this point, if you were to advocate détente with Russia, it would be like saying it would be like announcing to the world that you have STDs or something.
Oh, that's always going to be like this. So look, we can't be. If you're going to act against the system, you're always going to get repressed to one extent or the other. So it's a matter of your choice. Like, we don't advocate violence, but obviously we got to be able to face some repression. Okay, and of course Maria Cernat is right to say that it's very difficult in Romania, it's very difficult in Poland. I can confirm that. But I've been smeared, a Russian agent, a Chinese agent, and of course, like, this is going to be there because, but on the other hand, it's very easy. Like, you got to be an idiot to want a war or confrontation with Russia in Poland. You got to be an idiot. Like, how is Poland able to, confront in any respect Russia? Russia is, a superpower, regardless of what majority of the Polish people or Polish politicians think about them. Okay. Because the dominant narrative is that they are primitive, stupid, and drink too much and stuff. That's
and Poland was the one that actually made the vodka, right? There's the vodka war still, right?
Yeah. But that's I guess, funny aspect of the thing. But look, how are we going to what? We're going to invade Russia? What do we want? We should want sane people, people who are all right in their head. They should want to have good relations with their neighboring country. And the fact that we have a ruling traitorous elite that wants to expose our country to a potential conflict in Russia, and America is halfway around the world from Moscow, okay, and we're right on the border. So the fact that our treasonous elite wants to expose ourselves, wants to expose us, okay, to this danger of nuclear annihilation, okay,
exactly.
And if you support that, you are not all right in your head. I mean, you need treatment here, because you suffer from a very deep cognitive disorder. So if
By the way, same thing for people who do not understand how awful this pivot to Asia and supporting whatever groups in Hong Kong and same thing.
if we are, for the moment, Russia does not really care about Poland, does not care about Bulgaria, because Russia's policy is actually leave us alone. That's Russia's policy. Okay, so they don't care. They really, I mean, for them, Poland could not exist, could cease to exist tomorrow, and nothing would change from the point of view of Russia. Okay, so if anything happens, like for example in 2008 with Georgia that invaded, I mean they really invaded Russia. Okay, so and for Russia it took what, like 3 days or 3 weeks? I don't remember to kind of. It's like, Russia could walk over Poland like an elephant that stepped on an ant. Okay. And they won't even notice. All right, so it makes just no sense. I mean, it's so ridiculous. It's ludicrous. It's insane to claim that we could have some people from America, armed forces. We're going to build this Fort Trump, as they had this idea. And we're going to defend ourselves against Russia. This is just complete madness. First of all, Russia doesn't care. I mean, you can have anyone here, and the only thing that they're going to do is they're going to put more missiles in their Kaliningrad district. That's what they're going to do. So what you're doing by inviting foreign troops is you're exposing yourself to more destruction. That's what you're doing, nothing else. Because once anything happens, the first bombs are going to be dropped here, not on Washington, here. So it's pretty much, it's pretty much like in 1939, like Poland made the choice that was worst of all possible choices and paid the full price, the full destruction of the country. And thank God they had the so-called communist invasion afterwards to rebuild their country, okay? Because no capitalist authorities would be able to do that to the extent that the planned economy allowed the Polish United Workers' Party to do after the Second World War. So look, there's a lot of confusion. I totally agree with this, and there's a lot of Russophobia and stuff like that. But once you step out the internet, you will see that the world is a little different. So people outside the internet, they don't care so much about Russia. They don't care so much about NATO. They care about whether you're going to have food on their table, roof above their heads, and whether you're going to have school for their children and hospitals for their elderly family members. And that's what we have to run on. Healthcare, definitely. This is the most important point now amidst this deadly pandemic. All right. And we have to reverse pretty much everything that was done to the healthcare system in Poland and other Eastern European countries over the last 3 years. We have to work on we have to definitely work on the question of abolishing the so-called, that's what they go by here in Poland, junk contracts, okay, which is not a proper employment contract, but the kind of contract where you are not entitled to any sick leave or maternity leave or something like that.
I think we call it 0-hour contracts in Britain, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Gig economy.
And we definitely have to work on the question of rebuilding the educational infrastructure and the base that we had, because now it's very difficult to, for example, I have 2 kids here, and it's a hell of a lot of work to register them, to go to school and so on and so forth, right? So these are the things, and pensions and stuff and other stuff. I could speak for an hour about that. But look, there are problems that we have to offer solution to, and at the moment it's not Russia. In terms of Russia, we should obviously favor absolute, détente and neutrality. It's like if they have their issues, like the Americans have their issues with Russia, fine, let them have their issues. We're not playing a part here. So no American troops, no foreign troops, why did we kick out the Soviet troops? Why have we kicked them out if we're to invite the Americans ones now? It makes no sense, right? So it's very easy to argue, okay? And every sane person that is not an internet troll in favor of the Euro-Atlantic ideology is going to understand that. So I'm not really worried about this. I'm just worried about our capacity and our capabilities. If we're really able to do that in the foreseeable future, say in the coming 10 years or something like that.
All righty. Well, on that note, dare I say, optimistic notes, because even though it seems as if things are getting shittier and shittier in Eastern Europe, but from the conversation I had with you, I actually think. No, I think, well, what you guys are doing at the Barricade and like-minded comrades is very great, and I think that's where, the hope comes in. So, on that note, we were joined on this edition of 1+1 with Boyan Stanislavski, founding editor of the Barricade, co-host of the Barricade Live. I'm going to make sure to put a link to your Facebook page as well as the English page of the Barricade. And people, if they want, they can get in touch with me if to find other language versions. But Boyan, thank you so much for joining me today. It was a fantastic conversation. I look forward to having you back again because I want to talk more about Lech Walesa and the betrayal of solidarity and and current issues in Poland. But we're going to have to save that for another time. But
and I would like also us to talk, if that's going to be possible, about optimistic project. Okay, the optimistic project that the left should offer. All right, because there's so much pessimism that I think we're kind of drowning in that. and we should be able to emancipate ourselves from it, because our offer, I think, should be exactly optimistic. We want a better world, a more rational world, a better society, a society based in solidarity, and a society that's going to, be able to consume all the developments, technological or economic, at the benefit of everybody, not just of a handful of individuals. So our ideology, our concept is a very optimistic one. Only we have to find an appealing way to present it.
Yep. And Western lefties, take notes. So until then, we are joined on this edition of 1+1 with Boyan Stanislavski. Boyan, thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to having you back on in the future, all right?
Pleasure is mine. Thank you. Ciao.